Let's do this!
Good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I'm glad that you guys chose to spend a little bit of time hanging out with us here at a brand new episode of The Drop. My name's Toffees, and we got a lot going on tonight. We're going to talk about a couple of new topics, but before I do that, I want to introduce you to the folks who are joining me so that they have free reign to talk, and then I do want to give a quick shout out to those who've made this possible, and then we'll get right into the meat and potatoes. So, starting up at the top above me, you're going to see a man whose Twitter goes by Interrogate, though he's just known as Interrogate, and I'll be asking him the questions tonight. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Interrogate also plays for Noble. If you guys haven't figured that out from some of the photos or the yellow gear that he's wearing, he plays for NobleGG. Next to him, a team that's been around for a long time but has only recently hit the headlines in a giant splash of fuck you, which is some other teams, no, I'm kidding, as they got one of the IEM invite spots. I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit, Pandego, because you talked to me about how you guys have been putting in the work, but it hasn't really been seen because of your tournament presence in terms of online qualifiers. This is Pandego. Jared, I know him for a long time, since the Dota 2 days. How are you doing tonight, Jared?
I'm doing great. A little tired. It's been a long last couple of weeks, but overall it's been really good. Obviously super excited with the whole EG announcement and everything.
How can you not be?
I don't have a cool jersey to like shoulder check on stream, unfortunately, but those are coming.
We can't all be perfect. And speaking of not everybody being perfect, the last guest down on my far left is none other than a man who makes YouTube videos that tells you how to be perfect in the game of PUBG. Also a streamer by his own right and quite good on the left click, if I say so myself. That is none other than WTF Moses. How you doing today, sir?
Quite good, thank you.
Excellent. That was straight, simple, easy to the point. Okay, let's get right out. First, I give a shout out here, and I want to kind of thank those who've made the show possible. Guys, couldn't do it without the guys from Awesome. First off, they're a big tournament organizer here in the PUBG universe. Most importantly, they designed all the overlays for the show. I said I want to do a talk show, and I've run out of money to make overlays, and they said, we'll just take care of it, don't worry about it, and put this thing together. EasyCo Mac is the man for logos, and Ether put together the overlay. So thanks to those guys, and also Aces Republica Gamers for giving me the laptop that we operate the show off of. So thank you to them as well. So that covers the basics. Now the real people to thank is you, the viewers. If you're watching on the podcast, on Twitch, on YouTube, on Podbean, on Stitcher, wherever it is, it means the world to me. Thank you for that. Please feel free to leave a review or feel free to sub if you feel super magnanimous. If you want to keep the show running, patreon.com/Toffees. Okay, we got the business stuff out of the way. Let's jump right into it. We got 40 minutes tonight. I'm going to run a clock in the middle of the screen that keeps count. We're going to spend no more than 10 minutes per topic. That way we can't ramble on and on and on about something that's not that interesting, much like I'm doing at this particular moment. So the first topic on the docket is what was just announced in patch notes. Since the day that esports became a part of PUBG, one of the major discussions has been, what do we do about the blue zone? How do we stop people like Raptor to Raptor from sitting in the blue zone until the very end of the game and then just popping out because he's been spamming heals? This is their solution going into IEM. I'm going to read the actual, what it said in the notes here. Let me pull it up for you guys in just a second. They said that they are increasing the blue zone damage. The blue zone dot increases when characters are farther away from the blue zone. This principle does not apply to the first blue zone. So that's what we know so far. I tried it. It hurts like hell. What do you guys think so far?
All right.
Well, I mean, the first reaction, I think, at least for me, from a competition standpoint, is looking at how some of these teams have been managing their transition and movement phases. I think it puts a lot more pressure on the current kind of shift in the first-person meta of crashing compounds in the middle of the map. I don't know how that's going to affect the RNG aspect, especially for teams who kind of get caught out in those movement phases. But for the regular player, it's going to mean probably quicker games and larger end game circles with less people in them as this change gets, people get accustomed to it. But it's pissing some people off, at least from what I can tell.
Yeah, that's an interesting, I mean, let me ask you this. I know that you play a lot of pubs, Moses, because of your streaming and sort of what you do. I obviously play a ton of pubs. I'm not on a pro team. I just love watching PUBG. For those of you guys, for Noble and Evil Geniuses, do you guys spend most of your time playing in sort of scrims, or are you guys constantly playing in sort of the pub environment?
We do a few scrims a week, but I spend a lot of time in pub games. And I guess it's different for each mode. Like I feel like for pubs, the blue change would like it'll kill a lot of the less experienced players, which will make the game probably more boring. But in competitive, I feel like I honestly don't feel like it'll change too much. I've done some tests on the test server, and it seems like the times that you want to heal in blue is not really affected by the change too much. Because like you're just trying to heal in the blue for a limited amount of time. If you have the first aids to do it, then you're still going to get those placements, and I don't think it's like punishing enough, especially in the early game as well. Like the first few circles, they still don't do too much damage, and you can still, rotate the whole map in the blue if you want, and it's not that punishing.
Okay. And for those of you who are asking, to give you detail, the farther you are from the circle, in later circles, the more damage you take. Essentially, I think for my test, I figured out around circle 4, it starts to chunk ridiculously strong. A lot stronger than it used to be. So where you used to be able to sort of maybe wait for your opponent to run and then make your move and try to take them out and then take circle, it's going to be a lot more costly for you to do that now. So that's the big change, and that's what we're talking about in terms of, will this hurt pub play? Will this be amazing for competitive? How do you think this is going to affect competitive play?
I guess, sorry, I just have a question for Interrogate. So I guess as far as the actual effect it has on the game, would you say that it puts more or the same pressure on meds? Like the circle might not be doing enough damage, but is it doing enough to put pressure on meds?
I don't think so, because the first 3 circles you could still heal with just bandages and boosts. So you're still saving all the first aid kits, which is the most important thing. Realistically, like the boosts and the bandages don't really matter late game. It's all about how many first aids you have. And if you don't have to use those first aids within the first 3 circles, then you still have them all for the end game. So it just didn't seem like it was punishing enough early game, I think, as well as late game.
So do you think that this is going to solve anything for competitive? I mean, at the end of the day?
I think it'll definitely lower the player count. Like, I think it'll definitely lower the player count a bit, but I think you'll still have people healing in the blue for placements. It'll just, I don't know. I think it could be like the same effect where there's going to be more people forced into the circle because it hurts more, but that also means that more people die quicker when they're all fighting each other. So if you heal in the blue for, let's say, 15 first aids right now in the current patch, you're going to get a few placements. But if you heal for, let's say, 5 first aids in the next patch, you're going to get like similar amount of placements because more people will be dying at a faster rate. So I don't know. I feel like it'll be kind of like the same kind of effect.
So from a placement standpoint, not much will change. Like that's kind of what. So maybe the focus won't be as much on the act of being in the blue, but more so like I guess the change I was imagining would be to more focus or to promote action more than trying to get placement from chilling in the blue for however long you can. Is that so? So the necessity to heal is not as much, but the benefit of placement kind of remains the same. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, and I think I saw a tweet from one of the TSM guys that said really right now one of the meta strategies is when you get to that final couple of circles to just throw all of your first aid kits to one guy, have him sit in the blue and spam heals while the other 3 go and fight and get kills. And that sort of counts for the kill score and the camp score and all that fun stuff. So theoretically, this limits the impact of the 3 what do you want to call this? 3 sleep 1 strategy or whatever. It makes it a little bit less palpable in the last circle. I think it'll also be nice from a caster standpoint. The thing that I hate about the last couple circles is that there's so many teams still sort of coasting their way in, and it just becomes really chaotic for about 40 seconds while you lose 15 players. I think that you'll have less teams coming into that final circle, so it'll be a little more fun to watch. Pandago, what do you think about the changes to blue? I haven't heard anything from you yet.
So I haven't gotten to actually test it all yet.
Okay.
So I'll assume that Taro's, testing is pretty good with the whole I mean, the first circle is not changed at all. I think the two big circles where it makes a difference right now is the first circle, because if it's not affected at all, you're just going to be able to sit and still loot a town on the other side of the map, like he said, and just come in later. I would imagine maybe it'll be a little hard to really stretch that to like the second one if it actually does significant damage. If you know the white circle is on the east side of the map and you're looting the west coast or something like that, you might not be able to do that. I haven't tested to see if that would work, but for pubs, I don't think it'll do anything. I mean, most of the time when I play pubs, especially for squads, there's like 30 people alive by the time the first circle rolls around anyways. Like, I spend half the game like walking around just bored out of my mind trying to stay disciplined so I don't lose to like 6 grass snakes. So that's a whole different conversation on why they need to fix matchmaking. I'm not going to lie, though, this season has been better. Like, we've actually run into good teams, like, because there appears to be some form of matchmaking now. It's still pretty bad, I think, and it could be way better. But yeah, so staying on topic. For competitive play, I do tend to agree that it might shake things up a little bit. There might be a little less people going into that death circle that people like to call it, where it's like 60 people trying to run in and crawl around and jump around and do everything they can to stay alive. And it's honestly, that's one of the parts of the game where it's like you can do things to increase your odds to win, but if you don't have a favorable position, it just kind of is where most of the RNG happens. I think that's the core issue that most players want to address, and I don't think this will fix it at all. I don't think this is like anywhere near what's gonna like fix that problem. I think like there's tons of different ways they could have approached it, but at its core, this won't really remedy the issue that pro players have, and that it's like what Moses said. People want to watch more action. They don't want to see people trying to stay alive as long. Like, the way I describe it is, this game is supposed to be a game about fighting to survive. It's not just supposed to be about fighting. It's not supposed to be running around just killing everyone. It's not just supposed to be about surviving. Like, you're supposed to fight other people for position and to like control the map. And then supposedly the game is supposed to constantly develop to the point where there's, 1 or 2 or 3 teams fighting each other in the end game with position and gear. And that's when like the really cool fights will happen. Right. But as is right now, in competitive play, I've literally never had. I've had maybe 2 of those fights, like in my entire
limping into the end game with 30 bullets, a couple of first aids, and 2 dead teammates or something like that.
I still stand by. You guys know Meter from Gorilla Core. His idea of having a special meter that fills up as you're in the blue, and as the meter gets more full, you start to take increasing damage from the blue throughout the game. So you can choose to blow your meter early on during the loot phase. You could choose to blow it in the late game if you're trying to stall or make a flanking move. And like once the meter's full, you're taking 4 or 6x. So I thought that was a pretty cool. I mean, we'll see what they do. I think that it seems to me the blue zone fix that we're getting right now is an IEM hotfix. I don't think this is going to be the last we see of it. We want to try to make IEM a little more exciting than sort of, they ran to that, remember that blue, what was it, the water circle that happened at the last big tournament, like Gamescom, that was just like so rough to watch.
Painful.
It was, and everybody was like, this is esports ready, so I think this might be a chance for them to try to solve that a little bit.
Hopefully.
So we'll see. Go ahead.
I don't know if they're actually going to have water changes in time for IEM, though, which is the thing. I think it's going to come down to maybe there'll be some circles at IEM that are on the water, and there might be some 45 people swimming around in the water. It just depends on how things go.
I do feel like that the water... I don't know, maybe I'm just imagining this, but I feel like water circles have happened less frequently than they used to.
If you notice, there's a tendency now that around the 3rd or 4th circle, depending on how much water is in the map, that it'll adjust almost all the water out in that 4th. Am I crazy?
No, I feel very similar. It is much rarer for me to see water finishes. I think in the Awesome, like in all the Awesome weeks, I've seen one.
After Gamescom at some point.
Yeah, I think they changed it because unless it's at the Yasnaya River area, most of the time if you're around coasts, it'll adjust almost all the water out by the 3rd or 4th circle.
I agree. I think the Yas River is the only one that's sort of still a little bit of an issue. Interrogate might actually remember that one game we had where it was just like all of the Awesome server was in the water. And the river it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So that's the one downside, but hopefully all of the IEM games will be lots of fun finishes, military finishes, things like that. All right, so that's about all we got for the Blue Zone right now. We'll keep you guys updated as sort of those changes happen. I know some of you listen to the podcast because we keep you updated with what's going on in terms of PUBG and developments in terms of how to play things. That said, I want to talk briefly about IEM Oakland. Team selections have all come in. Initially, they were going to do 10. I think they upped that to 13 teams with direct invites, if my memory serves me correctly. Interestingly enough, so we're going to go to Pandago briefly for this one. Pandago's a member.
12 or 13? I think it's 12.
I think you're right. It's 12. So Pandago is one of the last teams announced. He's just announced a new signing for Team Evil Geniuses. If you guys don't know who Evil Geniuses is, you probably have your head under a rock and are new to esports anyway, but they are a team that's been around for a long time, used to be part of GGA. They've got kind of a pedigree in other esports. They just joined and got a direct invite. Now, I was talking to you yesterday about this, Pandago, because I said, where did you guys come from? Like, I haven't seen you in any of the major tournaments in terms of, like, Awesome Server 1 or PUBG Showdown Series, stuff like that. How did you go from essentially fighting your way through Contender, and I think you're not even in Awesome right now, to signed by EG and a direct invite to IEM? Did you, how did you guys earn that spot? Because you're telling me it was based on something specifically.
I'll just kind of use the first few minutes of this really quick to kind of just give the backstory overall, because I think it will be better than just being like, this is what it was. But essentially, my team in different renditions has been trying to get into competitive PUBG since like a month, basically since the day Gamescom was announced. Like, I had no real major intentions of playing this game competitively. I was just, a leaderboard grinder like everyone else, having fun and playing. And then I saw the opportunity that they had provided that you could actually go to Gamescom if you could find somebody to, or you could self-fund, I suppose, if you're rich, yourself to Gamescom, and you placed in like the top 10 on the leaderboards. You could go and play in like the duos tournament. And at that time, I was a duos player, spent a bunch of time playing duos. And I mean, there obviously aren't as many tournaments in duos, but that's where Taro knows me from. Like, I've been playing duos since basically the game started with Nomi, one of my teammates, and essentially we didn't make it to that, unfortunately. I couldn't find the funding, so we weren't able to like fly out there and play it. Got to watch it though; it was still a super awesome event. But since then, I've been talking to orgs for the last 2.5 months, basically, about trying to sign a squad team, because everyone only wanted squads at that point. And obviously I saw, where the game was going. Like, it's pretty obvious that squads is the best. First-person squads is just the way the competitive scene should be. So we hooked up with another duo team that I've known for a long time as well. We played against them a bunch. Ghoul and Watts have been like fantastic on the NA leaderboards. And then ever since then, we've basically just been grinding and trying to get into the scene. But it's very difficult to, without an organization backing you, or without some sort of pedigree that basically you got if you went to Gamescom, or if you have already been grinding squads for the last like 4 or 5 months, which is basically before the time of esports for this game, you probably weren't getting into any of these tournaments unless you were in within like the first season, right? Like when they started and they were looking for people to sign up for them still. So we haven't been able to play in these just because they're kind of like closed off to the general public since we have started looking to play squads. But since then we have played open in PUBG Online. We worked our way up through that. We like had a 60% win rate or something, and then we played contenders more recently. We're like 3rd right now or something like that. We just are playing in the Showdown promotional with Noble on Thursday. So I mean, we've been performing well since we've started playing together as a team. And then besides that, we've been sort of in talks with people and behind the scenes, I guess you would say, and like kind of been like recognized is because we've been performing really well on the leaderboards. Like when we played duos, we were always top 10 NA duo players. Me and Ghoul and Watts were just like constantly in the top 10. I've been there since alpha, basically on and off, whenever I have time to actually like commit to the grind that is required to get top 10 with this game, which is insane.
Yep.
And then same thing with squads. I mean, we were like all top like 30 last season. When it ended, we kind of stopped grinding it because like, I mean, we can talk about this another time if you want, maybe another topic during the talk show, but the leaderboard right now is basically whoever can put in the most time ultimately gets it. So that's why I'm not saying like that's why we deserve it, but we've put in the time. We've definitely like proven we're good. We just haven't played in like the tournaments that are seen by the community as a whole as this is what you like need to play in to deserve an invite. Because we're not able to get into them.
And I'm glad that this came up, and I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see at IEM. And in some ways, I think that the burden or the hopes and prayers of burgeoning teams is going to lay on your shoulders a little bit, Jared, because of the idea that, you brought this up earlier when we were chatting before the show, Moses. You said, well, is it a very different game and what's, between competitive and pub. So when we talk about leaderboards and top of leaderboard, me as a fan and as a big player who's, grinds leaderboards, wants to know that they're watching leaderboards, not just top tournaments. But the question is, do the teams who play in the top tournaments have an advantage or over teams that are just high up on the leaderboards? So I think that that'll be interesting to see at IEM.
I mean, I know you just. I guess I want to give my opinion. So
Yeah,
I guess I, as a player who, I try my best, you know, and to your point as far as the time required to climb the leaderboards, it's nearly impossible. I mean, the best chance you have really is trying to secure a good placement when a ladder board resets, or sorry, leaderboard resets, and then just grinding constantly. But I suppose in the squads atmosphere, and maybe you can give me some feedback as someone who plays competitively, which is not something I do. Is the level of competition you see in contenders just based on a pure game-to-game basis? Is it more a skill and positioning game than it is in like pubs, where you can out aim somebody almost into the top 10 95% of the time based on pure mechanical skill and experience? So translating leaderboard to competitive, I guess that's my question: is the level of competition that you face?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a totally different game. It's like saying, for example, when I played Dota, like playing a pub in Dota is totally different than playing like competitive Dota 2. It's just completely different animal. Obviously, lots of the same things apply, but like that's one of the things that our team has really been doing in Overdrive, is just trying to fully like dive into the competitive meta of this game. So there's just lots of different things that you basically have to keep in mind and approach. Ultimately, I think that the goal of Bluehole and the community as a whole should be those things should, you know, be more similar. Whether it's the leaderboards need to have better matchmaking so that the pro teams are just playing against each other, you know, on the regular, on ladder, and the games will play out that way. And then also, like, the settings of the games might need to change a little bit to the point where the competitive games are, you know, more geared towards competitive play, so it actually like accommodates the style of people playing differently. Because like, you know, you play a pub game, you literally never have so many people alive by like the third circle. It just doesn't happen. I think the most I've ever seen is like 40. So just the mentality that people approach the game with, when I see 15 people jump out of school, we're playing a pub, it's like, well, there goes, that'd be the first 10 minutes of a competitive game, all killing each other off right now.
Yes.
So yeah, it's something that is, there's no doubt it's different. It's completely different. It requires a totally different mindset. You know,
there's also the dilution aspect as well too, right? I mean, the dilution of players, not to mention, and then we'll get to this later, I'm not meaning to steer the conversation this way, but I mean, the inflation, let's say, of a certain player base into the NA leaderboards, you know, again, from a time and volume standpoint, you're constantly under pressure to keep just playing games, because you have you know, constant changes, especially at the top of the leaderboard, based on, you know, volume alone.
Yeah. Well, let me. So I'll bring this up, and it seems like we're sort of touching on this a little bit. Yes, leaderboards matter, but if you look at the invite list for IEM, with the exception of EG, who sort of has come out of the leaderboard and out of sort of, I think it's very much like your camera is right now. You're sort of emerging from the shadows into the competitive side of things, a little more well known. The opposite of that is a team like NobleGG. You guys have been early adopters in this game. You guys were, honestly, I think more geared toward third-person perspective initially. Like, it seemed like that was really where you guys thrived, and have been sort of readjusting to the changing meta of this esport. But you're going to IEM, you also got a direct invite, and sort of in the opposite way, I guess, that EG did, where you just have gotten it because you've worked your butts off. You've been sort of hitting the leaderboards, working the tournaments, or so I should say tournament leaderboards. How do you think is the best way to fill those direct invite spots? Is it just take a top 20 from an established leaderboard with an established tournament? Should they mix and match it like this? Should it be which organizations have the best reputation and therefore assume they have the best teams? What do you think we should be looking for, guys, when we talk about filling these tournaments out in the future?
I think right now, like, it's hard to base the invites off of much, and that's why you're seeing some more, like, not everyone from PUBG Online or Osm is getting invited, because there's not much to go off of right now.
Right.
So I think, like, after this tournament, you're gonna see a lot different invites based on this tournament, like, that's gonna happen IEM, because they're gonna pull probably the top 5 to 10 teams from this IEM, and then they're probably gonna have the open qualifiers again, instead of like kind of guessing right now, because they're going off Gamescom, but as we know, that wasn't like the most competitive tournament. There's a lot of influencers and streamers and stuff, but so there's not much to go off of official tournaments, and I think that'll change after this tournament. because it'll truly show like a lot of the top teams will come out on top, and then they'll be recognized and invited to the next ones, and the lower teams will probably not get an invite.
Now,
I assume.
do you think for this to work, we have to have a standardized rule set or score system? Because I think one of the other big problems we're running into is there's a bunch of big I would say there's 4 or 5 tournaments that we are regularly going that most of the top teams play in, but every single one of them has a different scoring system, whether it's shooting for placement, shooting for kills, shooting for a combination of both. I think there's one tournament just announced like the biggest, if you get like 14 kills, you get almost more than a second place finish. But so we've got these huge deviations in sort of scoring. Do you think it would help the pro scene and sort of teams know where they are in terms of potential invites if Bluehole or somebody just came out and said, this is how we're going to do scoring, this is how we're going to establish invites, like tournaments that follow this score sheet work?
They're not connected to the community in that way. I mean, they're not. They don't have. I mean, there's a lot of complaints you could leverage for Bluehole. I mean, right now it's for my best analogy for Bluehole is like a really good restaurant, a restaurant with really good food and the worst possible service. Like if you can get the food, sometimes it's okay. But as far as like everything else around it, I mean, they're not connected. Like they're just trying to get these, and this is no disrespect to the players at all. So from EG, I think it's a name recognition standpoint. It brings legitimacy to the tournament. Not to mention the fact that and on the org standpoint, they're looking for skilled players with a level of performance that is recognizable to a community, like the leaderboard. And in the benefit of this team in particular, they're performing on an upwards momentum. They're showing that they can perform at a level that is commensurate in a tournament atmosphere as well. So they'll get there. But from a Bluehole standpoint, they want EG, they want TSM, they want Envious, because the fans see, hey, I know that brand, let's go watch this. And that's what they want, is eyeballs, views, clicks, all that stuff, buys. So that's kind of my thinking on it. But from a standardized rule set standpoint, you don't want Bluehole making those rules, because God help us if they do.
Right. I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think out of this tournament, a standardized rule set will just appear, right? Like, whatever the rule set is used for this, like, that will probably be what will lay the groundwork for at least the future tournaments. And I think that's part of why so many people are nervous, especially the players that are going to play in it, about how Bluehole is going to approach it. And, like, so many people have, I mean, I've been talking to Amir, and we've been, I mean, all the pro players have been talking to Amir, let's be real. But, like, everyone's been sending him their opinions on what it should look like and stuff like that. And a lot of the pro teams, I mean, like I said, our team is really not that, like, for how, like, we just got announced, we're not really that connected to, like, the scrims. Like, we played, like, 2 scrims, and that's with, like, smaller teams. We haven't played with any of, like, the sponsored teams. So I'm in a very unique place right now, because I'm coming from essentially, shelled out of the professional community because you're not one of the pros, and now I am on EG. So it's a kind of like a really trippy thing, right? Because, I mean, as Toffees knows, I used to play Dota. I never broke that shell as a professional player. So I was always the guy that, like, I mean, I made it into some pretty big teams and stuff, but I was never on, a tier 1 organization playing as a player or a coach where you, like, basically get every sort of thing that you think you are, like,
all the
deserve,
benefits.
Right? Yeah. So now I'm there through playing merit and just really, like, working our asses off, and by knowing people on EG. And so I want to bring that to this community and break that wall down, basically. That is honestly one of my biggest goals. I've experienced that so much. Let's be real. I'm gonna come on this and say this now. We had multiple signing opportunities before EG, but I held off on every single one of them because I knew that we needed a big brand to go to this tournament. Like, that is why, like, we deserve to go there on play, but there's, no matter what org we sign with, no one's gonna say that team deserves to go because we just, like, played the leaderboards and we didn't play in the pro community tournament. I mean, I think there's tons of great teams that aren't getting invites, and it sucks. But to me, the way to approach that isn't to be like, oh, well, like, this team doesn't deserve an invite. It's to look towards the future and say, we need a standardized way to get teams into this. I think the open qualifiers that they're announcing is honestly a really good sign. I think it's really good that Bluehole is attempting to do this early. I think it's good they added more invites, honestly. But I do think that the open qualifiers are good. They just need to really, like, figure out how to do that well for the next tournament. And they need to start planning it, like, a month ago.
I mean, at the end of the day, though, I think the problem with open qualifiers, as everybody can sort of comes down on, is in Dota, me and Jared go all the way back to Dota for a long time, I think years and years now. But everybody else has their experience with other esports. All of those esports are based on one very simple principle. It's one team versus one team, or one-on-one. So at any given Sunday, you can upset a boss or you can get beaten by pure skill. PUBG does not have that same set of rules. In an open qualifier, a team that is incredibly good and skilled, either of your teams, or maybe me and Moses' pub that we'll throw together for this qualifier, could get caught with our pants down by a bunch of bush Wookiees who have no legitimate strategy and are like, we're just going to sit here in the middle of the circle hiding in some bushes and try to wipe some teams. I mean, that's one of those things where it sort of throws a monkey wrench into the best teams will come out of the open qualifier system, doesn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
So you just had to have to let me. I've put a lot of thought into this.
Okay, lay it on
Sorry,
me.
you guys. I'll definitely let you guys speak in 1 second, but they just have to redesign how they do it. This game is a game of total variance, right? I always compare it to poker. Like, that's why I'm saying they need to have an open qualifier for the next land like the day after IEM ends, and it needs to be month-long tournaments like Awesome and PUBG Online that are officially recognized by Bluehole and say these are the ladders you play in to go to lands. Like, they need to have ways for people to get into it and play it, you know, as open qualifier players, kind of like PUBG Online does have, which is nice. But like, they need to have like long qualifiers. They shouldn't have qualifiers over 1 weekend. It needs to be over 4, and it needs to be kind of like what you are playing as a pro player in the setting that once you get to IEM, that's what you'll experience. You need to play 10, 12, 15, 30 games. So yeah, that's how they can do open qualifiers in a fair way.
I was just gonna say, like, I think the best way would be to have an official league that everyone can play in, and the top players are just all going to get invited. So it's not going to really be like a qualifiers or anything. It's just like you grind your way up, or not grind. I mean, you play your way up in an official league, and then everyone who's at the top, they go to the final tournament. Like,
something.
They need to.
It's easy. I mean, the path is clear.
Right.
Like Bluehole has clearly chosen the partner in ESL. I mean, ESL props up a league, and that's the end of the conversation. Right. That's it.
Well, and you follow maybe like a European football model, right? Where I think Awesome is sort of leaning towards it a little bit. The idea that the top 18 teams fill one server, then the next 18 and the next 18, and you work your way up or down, and they just need to fine tune the system. The problem with that is, you know, Jared brought this up earlier. How do you get from the bottom servers up to a premier status in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks between lands? Because that's got to be tough to do.
Why not a model like ESEA does it then? Like, I mean, is there not a player base that would support that amount? Is like the competitive community is so new that, you know, the barrier to entry is only the ability to put together 4 players and sign up.
That's true.
But the only issue right now is that there's limited you know,
space.
There's limited space, and there's limited interest, and a lot of the stuff, a lot of the limiting factors actually, and again, not going down this rabbit hole too deep, is in Bluehole's hands. The spectator model, the way the gameplay shakes out on a day-to-day basis, the perception of RNG, all these things that, you know, they have enough plates spinning as it is, you know, is keeping the servers online. There's a lot more for them to deal with, but at the same time, the only thing that really worries me from a competitive standpoint is that you just don't want them saying, okay, what? Yeah, sure, do that. And then just not have any thought put into it. They need like Amir. They need like 5 Amirs, I think, thinking in a room together, talking to the players, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that esports is finally aged enough that hopefully games or the developers will have started to see sort of the value of having a hands-on or relationship with the process. Instead of, you know, in the past we've seen esports sort of be, you know, Valve has sort of the, okay, you put on a tournament and we'll just make sure it looks good. You know, we're not going to tell you how to run it. So I think we'll see how that develops. Now, I want to move on because I want to get through at least one more topic before we end our show today. That said, though, does anybody else want to chime in on sort of IEM, invites, or what they want to see sort of develop in the tournament scene going forward? Because I don't know when you'll be on next. I want to get your opinions on that, if you have it. You can soapbox if you need to.
I'm just really hoping that Bluehole is able to implement a lot of the design changes that a lot of the pro teams are asking for IEM, so that the gameplay can really like shine. Because this game, I mean, everyone that plays it, and I'm assuming that pretty much everyone that's watching this podcast right now and everyone on it, like, sees the potential of this game. But to me right now, like, I'm pretty disappointed, honestly. Like, I still play it and love it, but like, it could be so much better than it currently is. Having 60, the game is not designed to have 60 people alive in the third circle. Like, it's just not meant to be played that way. Like, if they redesigned that and like they could actually fix it so it's more about going around and looting, fighting people in the early game for specific resources, like gearing up more by killing other teams, and like having these little skirmishes all over the map and actually like developing that, then I think it has massive potential. But it's going to be, honestly, like, based on my experience so far with game devs, it'll probably be years before we get to that point. Like, it's gonna,
how much of that EG money are you willing to wager on this?
it's going to be a lot of iterations of gameplay before it gets to the point where the game is probably going to be, like, to me, what I can envision as, like, you know, the best esport in the world. Like, it's the game that everyone's going to want to watch and play in, because it's, like, super exciting at all stages, and it really rewards skill. There will always be elements of RNG in this game. It's part of what makes it great, honestly, but they need to really gut out as much of that as possible.
I agree. I also often wonder if sort of right now the focus for esports is you have to make it to IEM, you have to make it to Gamescom in order to make, or have a huge organization in order to make this profitable or functional as a job, right? And that's something that I hope changes soon. Online tournaments aren't allowed to give prize pools at the moment, from what I understand, or from what I've seen. So it's one of those things where everyone who's working in the esports right now, everybody who's trying to produce this stuff, is essentially doing it for no other reason that they want to be early adopters and hopefully be part of this when it gets bigger, because we buy into it. So that's one of those things that you wonder, at what point do we have the ability to keep smaller teams, right? You know, in Dota 2, Jared, you can survive as a tier 2 team. It's not a caviar and, you know, diamonds existed.
Back when I played, you couldn't.
Right. And back when I started, you know, you couldn't off a small cast. You couldn't cast off gigs and pay your bills. But now you can work in the tier 2 division, sort of make ends meet, and work your way up to tier 1.
Yeah.
With the model we're seeing right now in competitive play for PUBG, it's just not doable, because if you're not one of the 18 teams who plays at IEM for the big money, you know, you got to face a tough decision at the end of Intel Extreme Masters, right? Every time one of these tournaments ends, you got to go, can I afford to do this for another 4 months and hope I get to the next tournament? So I look forward to seeing how that goes. I think that's going to develop over time, but I want to get into something that's a little more broad here for our listeners. Not all of us are playing in the competitive scene, but I guarantee all of us are playing a copious amount of PUBG. So let's talk from your guys' perspective. Here's a fun question. What do you think is the most important thing for a noob or a young player? When I say young, I don't mean like 12. I mean like new to the game, sub 200 hours, to focus on? And what do you think the most important thing for a grizzled veteran to focus on is? Let's start with noob. What do you think is the most important thing for a new player to sort of consider or work on as they look to improve their game?
I think the biggest undersold point, at least from an improvement standpoint, is just take a deep breath, man. Look at the map, look at the position, and don't make brash decisions based on fear. Keep an eye on the clock too, as well.
What about you?
That's a broad statement, I guess.
But it's smart. It's easy to overlook that. Go ahead.
I think a very important thing for, like, mainly for people that wanna be like up and comers that aren't the best right now, but they're looking to play competitive in the future, is like, make sure you have the tools to play at your best. Like, make sure your settings are all figure out what are the best, most optimal settings that you're gonna have the highest FPS. Make sure you work on your sensitivity, like something that's really comfortable, that you can aim probably with, that you feel comfortable with, and you can like land the kills with. Make sure your sound is good. Make sure you have like good headset, good equipment that you can use these tools to advance. Because if you're using bad mice, bad equipment, your settings are all blurry, and you know you're not playing on optimal stuff, then you're not going to perform, and you're not going to improve with that stuff. Like, you need to do research and figure out what's the best things to use out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously good to do early on too, just because once you develop the habits like of using different settings, it's way harder to break that. I guess for like noobs, like straight up people that aren't interested in competitive, like don't stop moving. Move around a lot. Try to stay near cover while you're looking for stuff. You know, it's very hard because there's so many people who play this game. So, you know, a noob to this game could be somebody that's actually like pretty good at games, will catch on quick. And then I've seen people, and I've played with people that are like just don't play games in general, that still like to play this game, that kind of they don't even care about improving, honestly. They just have a great time with it. But yeah, for noobs that are trying to improve, just try and stay near cover and move around. If you're newer to the competitive scene and trying to get involved, just reach out to communities. You just have to, I mean, get involved in squads. Obviously, if you're not already playing squads, like you need to start trying to play in that. PUBG Online is probably right now like the best way to do it. Like I said, one of my biggest goals and one of the things I would really love to bring to this community is like in-house leagues or some sort of format where people can prove themselves and play together in like a competitive setting, because there's no way to actually really practice a competitive environment unless you're in a scrim group. So that needs to happen now. Like I'm going to literally make that my new mission in life, to basically bring in-house leagues and competitive like practice environment to PUBG, not after launch, because there's already so many teams like staking their time and money and lives on this that it's just like that needs to be something that can be put up in a month.
Well, I will take this moment because you bring it up, just so that everybody knows. I know a fair amount of pros organizers watch or have listened to the podcast. There is a Discord group that started, I think, a week and a half ago that somebody's putting a lot of work into, that's inviting anybody who's a pro team player.
I believe I'm in that. Yeah.
A top team, or, and I like that they added this, or a top 100 player in any format. So you can sort of jump in there, you can pick up groups, you can play, and ultimately I'd like Bluehole to give them server production, like the ability to build custom servers, so that we can probably, because I mean, you saw this, it was huge. One of the biggest things that helped develop specifically North American Dota, and don't talk about the forums because they're a disaster, but the idea of the growth of the scene was sort of these elite leagues. What was it called? The one that Mike started that he ended up selling out and getting rid of. So IXDL and stuff, where we found ways to bring top players together, let them pub, let them sort of learn about each other, and then we saw really a growth of the scene out of that. So I think you're right. Yeah. If you guys aren't part of that Discord or you're interested in learning more about it, you can tweet at me, Toffees TV, and I'll connect you with the guys who are in charge of it if you're a top 100 or a pro player and are interested in doing that. So I know yet another Discord, but at the end of the day, this is what happens with a new scene. We get like 30,000 people doing the same thing, and everybody needs it, and then eventually one will rise to the top, the dross will fall away, and at the end of the day, you end up with a pretty good service. So join them all, leave them one by one. That's just been my motto since the beginning of this whole thing, and it's a good way to sort of to do things. Okay. Real quick, tips for the grizzled veteran. You guys, I'm sure, all have a stupid amount of hours. I'll actually ask you that in a few minutes. You've been playing a long time. You've all hit top ranks in leaderboards or in tournaments. What would you tell somebody, let's say someone like me, who's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in this game, consistently sits in the top 1 to 2,000, but feels like they just can't make the next step? What's the best tip for a grizzled veteran?
I mean, I can't speak from a position of pro level of experience, but I think I often review, and I've solicited, as some of these guys in the chat might know, a solicited video for VOD review, and I watch a lot of the competitive VODs. I think the one thing you see consistently from players, even at the competitive level, is the inability to be decisive in your decision making. Having someone in the room to make the right call at the right time, especially in squads, that's a trait that you don't come across. But if you can develop that, you become very valuable. So having the ability to understand the game as a poker game or a chess game at a strategy level, that's what you want to pour time into. You know, take some time off your aiming mechanics, not, you know, don't ignore it, but spend some more time looking at the strategy and becoming a shot caller or understanding that aspect. And, you know, in an RNG game, it can be harder, but that's kind of my thought anyway.
What do you think, Interrogate?
I think a big thing, honestly, is confidence. Like Moses was saying, decision making and confidence is pretty big. When you have, let's say, a lot of worse players, they'll get scared and they won't want to make pushes, or they won't want to make plays, and they'll end up getting pinched in multiple situations or multiple angles. I think being confident and knowing like when you can push. And figuring out when you can push and how much damage you could do to a team is very important, because if you have a team that's low health and you tag them up, like, you don't want to just sit still and get flanked on your other side. So you got to know when to be aggressive and when to be confident in yourself and make like certain big plays, because that'll pay off huge. If you make a big play, if you wipe a squad in a compound, you could just have the best compound in the game. And it's very important to do that sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You get stuck too a little bit in the placement mindset as well. Is that we can't and again, this is me. This is a simulated reality in which I'm making this example. But I can kind of see it in the map movement when I see movement phases, and you can see the teams that kind of circle a compound that might even be empty and then just drive away from it because they don't want to try and commit to that fight. But at the same time, it's yeah, man, it's a confidence, really confidence.
And then Jared, what do you think?
I mean, since they kind of talked about the competitive thing, that's funny because that's literally one of the things my team talked about today. That's one of the biggest differences between playing ladder and playing competitive. Like, you know, we're still the same shots and stuff. We're all doing that stuff, and we still have similar decision-making processes. But it's like in pubs, you can just walk in and kind of do whatever. In competitive, you need to be like single-minded and focused, and you just need to make a decision and stick to it because there's not enough time in the current way the game works to do any sort of backtracking. Like, you're like, well, let's do this. Like, well, maybe, and then you're dead in like 2 seconds if you basically hesitate and then make a different decision. So the confidence in your ability to shoot people and kill people and your confidence in your decision making is super important. And then since they talk so much about that, and I'm just agreeing with them, for like somebody that, you know, is trying to grind leaderboards and playing it, at the end of the day, it's just the same sort of approach you take to playing poker, and you have to commit a ton of time to it. You need to have solid baseline strategies, and you just need to be resolute and just super disciplined. Like, you just have to, you're going to want to run out in the field and get that airdrop. You're going to want to run across like the map and kill people. If you're trying to really grind to the top of the leaderboards, you've got to sit in that building and just stare out the window and just sip your tea and be like, man, I really wish I could go fight people right now.
Recognize the best option, man. Recognize the best option, even if it sucks and it's boring.
The sooner Bluehole can gear the leaderboards towards competitive play and actually like fix everything up and add maybe a rule set, the better it is for everyone, because then like it'll be more, people will get to more experience the play of competitive players, which will make the esports scene grow a lot because people will be more interested in watching the really true top players play in that. And then also it'll just give people a chance to have an open opportunity to play as a competitive player. And to me, that's super important. And I think, I mean, like I said, the way they should do that is basically they just need to have a separate ladder, like for top tier players. Once you hit a certain point, it's like Hearthstone or any other game like that. Once you hit a certain point, you just get like siphoned off into a different matchmaking with a different rule set, and like it's just you're playing the competitive game now, essentially.
That's an interesting idea. Okay. Well, I will leave you guys with this thought as somebody who doesn't have a massive team or friend group that I play with. I pub a lot. I will say one of the things that I would recommend is don't be scared to play with players who are better than you. And when you do notice that someone's better than you, pardon my French, like grab on and hold on, learn. So you guys know Dre from Tempo Storm. Occasionally I play with him, and like it's one of those things where like he's freaking crazy, and I'm sure you've seen him breach on you before, and you're just like, this guy's bananas. Like legit, when I play with him, I just tuck in behind him like I'm slipstreaming and say, okay, teach me how you push these buildings. And I think that that's something you can take to pubs. When I meet a good player, I'm not scared to message them and say, listen, we need to play together in the future. I love this dialogue. I like playing with you, and I love watching you play once I'm dead. And that definitely helps your game.
You're like the little fish under the sharks.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? The more I eat off of that shark, the bigger I get. And the next thing you know,
exactly.
I'm fucking throwing punches. So it's a good way to get better. It was something I had to teach myself in Dota a long time ago. In games like this, when ranking systems come into play, it can be intimidating to play with somebody who seems like, you know, God, I hope they don't die first and watch me potato this. But that's how you get better. So I think that's a big recommendation, is don't be scared to build those teams and those connections.
Listen, I'll take a sub spot on EG. It's fine. Or no, I mean, whatever. Just you throw me on the team, it's fine. I'll just learn.
He'll follow you around. He'll just be that little guy eating off the shark. All right, last thing we got time for. I want to do a lightning round. I always have some sort of really easy to answer question. Last week it was loadouts. Week before that was favorite drops. And here's a fun one that I'm curious about. Today's lightning round, I'm going to answer this first because I feel like it's going to sound really cool when I say what I do, and then you guys are all going to embarrass me. So the lightning round for today is, how many hours do you have played in this game called PUBG? I'm going to go first because when I say this, people who are listening on the podcast, my casual fans, are going to go, oh, that's pretty good. So I have 675 hours logged. Now all of you go, wow, Toppies, that's impressive. Get it out of your system. And let's roll around and see what these guys have played, because I am very curious about that. We'll start off with, I think Moses is probably pulling up his library and checking real quick.
I have the alt account too, so I think I'm close to 1,000.
All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Definitely kicks my ass. Interrogate, I know you've been around since like before the beginning of PUBG. How many hours do you have played in this thing?
Right now I'm at 1993.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
I have a job, all right? Okay.
I got a job.
I
got a job and 2 kids. Pandego, how many hours do you have in this?
I'm right in the middle of them. I'm at somewhere around 1,400 with the main account, and then yeah, like probably 200 or 300 hours added in with like beta and all that stuff.
So. And I was not surprised to hear that from you guys. This is very common with what I hear from pros versus like streamers versus casuals. And this, I think, is valuable for those of you who are watching or listening at home. Don't get discouraged, man. You break the top 1,000, you start getting paired with these idiots, and they start blowing you off of motorcycles from 600 meters away. They have 2,000 hours. Just suck it up, practice your aim, and get right back in the game. That's what I love about PUBG, is sometimes I can kill Chappie when I'm sitting in a bush, and I feel pretty good about it. You know, I feel bad. I send him a text afterwards or a tweet and like, hey, sorry about bush camping you, but it felt nice to get the kill.
Do beta hours count?
Beta hours count, yeah. Leave me on beta.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they interrogate? Do beta hours count?
I'm at like $3,000 or something.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh,
no.
geez, okay. Yeah.
Beta hours are out. Throw those away. That's funny. All right, guys. Well, that's about all the time that we have for the show today. Do you have any last topics or anything you want to touch on before we sign out for the night? Okay.
I guess I just hope Bluehole improved their anti-cheat a little bit.
Word.
Oh, quick, just slip that in edgewise. We'll be here for another 40 minutes.
That is true. I know that
that could be an entire talk show, basically. You know, that's a topic that
we touched on it last week on the last show, so you guys can check that show out. We'll probably circle back to it after IEM and get some folks back. So if anybody feels very passionate about that, if you're a pro or a streamer or somebody who does a lot of hours and you have some strong feelings, feel free to message me and let me know that you'd be interested in being on that show, because we'll see how sort of things change. We know nothing's going to change while we're prepping for IEM. We'll see what sort of happens after that, and then circle back to talking about all of that kind of stuff. Real quick, let's go around so you guys can have a chance to do any shout outs or shutdowns or make fun of people or whatever it is you feel like you want to do with your time. We'll start with Interrogate and just go to Jared and then finish with Moses, and then we'll close out the show. So Interrogate, any shout outs or shutdowns?
I guess shout out to Noble, of course. They're great to us, and you know they get us in these tournaments, and it's awesome to be a part of like this huge esport that's looks like it'll turn out to be with all these big orgs jumping in. Also shout out to everyone in our discords that we play with all day, every day, grind squads all the time. So shout out to everyone that I play with.
Pandego?
Yeah, obviously shout out to EG for shout out of them, I suppose. You know, it's super great to be working with them. I know a lot of the players on the Dota 2 team, and it's really exciting to be able to call myself EG. It's like crazy. Sure. Wouldn't have thought of that when I was playing Dota 2. And then, yeah, I mean, shout out to the community as a whole. I think I'm just super excited where this game can go. And I am obviously very passionate about a lot of things. I'm sure, like I said, I could come on any of these shows and ramble on for like 2 hours by myself. But yeah, I just think that this game has a lot of potential, and I'm just hoping that as a community we can come together and really bring it together as a whole, because and that's one of the things I've loved about this community so far, and what I've seen is, I mean, barring my complaints about, you know, the scrim groups being shut off or being hard to play with people, but that's just an attempt of people to like curate the skill and keep it, you know, professional. Everyone's been really open and is always trying to help everyone else, and for the most part, compared to Dota 2 or other esports out there, this might just be because it's young and there's not any really bad blood yet, but like everyone's really cool with each other and really just hopes to see everyone as a whole do well, because everyone's just trying to build the scene right now. They're not trying to build up their own specific brand or personal brand or anything like that. So I just hope that that can be maintained by everyone all throughout, because I think that if that can be done, then that will make, you know, PUBG into the greatest esport ever.
Well, and you know, piggybacking that, I think Odyssey tweeted about what we love about the PUBG scene or the pro scene a couple days ago. And one of the things that I said I really love about it is the fact that it's very different in the context of every week at the same time in the same place. The top 40 to 60 teams in the sport are essentially getting together in a giant chat room or a giant lobby and playing together, right? It's not something where maybe you don't see another team for 6 weeks, or you don't see European teams, don't see North American teams for months at a time because of the tournament distributions. we all play together and we all see each other constantly, and that sort of, I think, has built a really cool community in that context where everybody's sort of very supportive of seeing everyone do well. So I like that. I hope it continues. I don't know what'll happen once the money starts to flush the sport, but we'll go from there and see where that ends up. Guys, a big thank you to everyone who is on the show. Interrogate, Pandago, and Moses. I appreciate you guys being
Moses
here.
didn't get to do a shout-outs, dude.
Oh, he didn't? Oh, yeah, fuck that. Well, anyways, so thanks for everybody being listening. No, I'm kidding. Moses, do your shout-outs or shutdowns.
Shout out for this podcast for giving me a fair shake, giving my shout outs. No, seriously though, but I just want to say a quick thank you to the entire competitive community for allowing me to poke around like a needy girlfriend, asking for information and just being generally receptive to everybody. And it kind of goes off Pandago there. It's been an open community. It's nice to see a new genre on the up and up that isn't a MOBA or Counter-Strike. So I'm hoping to see this thing on the big stage, and I hope now that we're all on the ground floor, we get to reap the benefits just as much as everybody else who gets to watch it. So
me too.
Yeah, that's it for me.
All right, listen, if I can be on just one desk in this damn esport, I would be very, very happy. You can find me at Toffees TV. You can find Moses at WTF Moses, just like the guy who lit the bush on fire. You can find Interrogate at Interrogate with 2 R's, and you can find at Pandago at PANDAEG0 over on Twitter as well if you guys want to follow them. Interrogate and Pandago play for EG and Noble. Pro players, glad to have you guys on the show. WTF Moses streams. You can get to his stream from his Twitter. He also creates tutorial videos you guys can check out. I think the newest one is, was that the 5 tips for winning or finishing?
No,
strong?
I do I break down rounds from pro players and other people. You can also check me on the desk at PUBG Online. I cast there as well.
There you go. So check him out casting at PUBG Online. You can see me casting at PUBG Online sometimes and over at Awesome every Sunday. So glad to be there doing that with them. If you guys want to support the show, you can review the podcast on iTunes. You can subscribe to it through Stitcher, Podbean, anywhere that podcasts are available. We have the show, so check us out there. We're on YouTube at 5 Midas Gaming, and of course, live on Twitch for the taping every Tuesday night. So a subscribe, a follow means a lot. And honestly, if you want to help keep the show going, as I brought up earlier, none of us are getting paid to do any of this stuff yet. You can go to patreon.com/Toffees and help us raise. It's about $50 a month to keep the show running. So any support there means an awful lot. We appreciate it. And I say we because I was raised in a corporate environment. I appreciate it. It's just me. You guys ever do that? No? I had a job that trained. Yeah, I had a job that trained me to always speak in the we context. Yep.
Yeah.
So to this day, I'll be like,
we nonstop.
Right? I'll be like, welcome to the stream. We're glad to have you. It's just me. So anyway,
just don't turn it off.
You can't help it. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you being here. Big shout out to Awesome and Asus, PUBG Online, all the big tournaments, and everybody else who's making this possible. And honestly, big shout out to Bluehole for making probably one of the best games that I have ever had the audacity to invest this much of my time in. So thank you to everybody. I look forward to seeing what we get next week. I'm not sure if we'll do a show, as I think most of my guests will probably be preparing for the online qualifiers or licking their wounds potentially afterwards. This should be a lot of fun to watch. That's Sunday, if I remember correctly. Do you guys know is opens on Sunday?
I'm not sure what day it is. I wish everyone the best of luck. That is going to be hard regardless of how good you are. Like,
that's true.
It's gonna. When I first saw it, because when I saw the rule set released beforehand, I thought it was literally just best of ones. Maybe it was. I think that's what they said it got listed as, but it wasn't in their plan. But that would have been impossible. Yeah. That would have been literally the most miserable thing. So I'm glad it got changed a little bit. But best of luck to everyone involved with that.
That's right. Neither of you have to worry about it. So all of us will be watching. Follow us on Twitter. We might do some viewing shows. I don't know if they're going to televise it. We're sort of all up in the air on that. So once I find out more details, I will, of course, let you guys know. So thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening. And as always, Toffees out.